Welcome to episode number 52 of the American Regularis Podcast. I'm your host, JD Walter, and it's been a minute. This has been the longest time since starting this podcast that I haven't got you guys one. I apologize for that. A lot of stuff going around the house. To be honest, in-laws were here, and it was fine, but the podcast studio is may or may not also be a guest bedroom, so it was kind of hard to get down here and record when I wanted to. But you can help me out with that. I've been crunching the numbers, guys, and if you get me up to 50,000 subscribers, we're a few shy of that. If you get me up to 50,000 subscribers, I think I can convince the old lady for this to just be just the podcast studio. I'm gonna say I believe that. All right, so before we get into the rest of this episode, which is a doozy, like, subscribe, tell your friends, yell it at some passerby out the window, yell the podcast, American Regularis, and then you have to tell them it's a podcast because they won't know what the hell that means. Get this show up to 50,000 subscribers, and I'll be getting you guys podcasts way more often, way better quality, and I got to tell you, another worry I have, at the beginning, around this time last year, I had one episode. I thought it was a pretty good one. A lot of pertinent stuff, a lot of good information, maybe a joke or two. And it drove me nuts because in the recording, I couldn't get rid of the chirping of baby chicks that my wife has in the basement. And it's that time of year again. And just one room away from me right now, we've got, 10 or 12 baby chicks being raised, and they were noisy as hell earlier. I've just been waiting for them to shut up to make this podcast. So, if you hear little whistles in the background, it's not anyone important. It's just a bunch of baby chicks, is what it is. Hopefully we get through this podcast without barnyard animal sounds. Okay. Now, too much has been going on since I've been gone to even tell you everything. But we're going to have a little bit of fun today listening to Michelle Obama. And I know those things generally don't go together, but I think we'll be able to enjoy that. Basically, she just wanted to try to prove on a very famous podcast just how unrelatable she could be. And we also want to talk about the UK government becoming Disney villains, Bond villains, I don't know. Some of the craziest ideas I've ever heard of. And we're going to let's start with that one first. Okay. I have this titled in my notes, which aren't thorough. I do most of this off the cuff, but I write some stuff down I don't want to forget. I wrote it down as Dimming the Sun. And that might sound really stupid to you guys. It's dumber. Okay. UK scientists. And when I say UK scientists, I'm talking about government-backed UK scientists. That's the United Kingdom for all of you people that suck at geography. They are planning to launch outdoor geoengineering experiments as part of a £50 million government-funded program. And more or less, pounds, I believe, are a little bit more than the dollar, but let's not get that in the way, right? Big government money on geoengineering experiments. That doesn't sound that bad. The Earth needs engineering. Earth engineering. It's that bad. This stuff is going to be performed by the Advanced Research and Invention Agency, also known as ARIA. It's the UK version of DARPA. And if you don't know what DARPA is, don't quote me on what the agency letters are, but it's something about research and all of that. DARPA's, they take place in the Metal Gear video games. They are the ones that make all the creepy robots. They're the ones that come up with all the insane inventions, all the new ways to kill people, all the new ways to spy on you. Like, that's DARPA, all right? And this is ARIA. And now, what they're planning on doing is saving the world, guys. They're going to save the world because, as you know, the number one most critical thing in the world is climate change. And it's getting too warm because of all the carbon in the air. And so they are going to try to blot out the sun a little bit, right? We don't want to, they're not going to go full Matrix on us or whatever, where the robots take out the sun, but they want there to be less sun, which would make the Earth a little bit colder, which just sounds like a really good idea to these jerks. They're calling it Stratospheric Aerosol Injection. Now, if that sounds like chemtrails, it's not, but it is. So what they're talking about doing is going up into the stratosphere, right? The uppermost layers of our atmosphere. There might be one more than that. Science people, don't come at me. They want to go clear up into the stratosphere, right? And launch a bunch of aerosol out into it. Particulates, things that will kind of get suspended in the upper atmosphere and reflect more sunlight back from the Earth. Okay, I guess you could call this a nanotechnology, depending on how small the aerosol is. Now, when I was a little kid, I remember them saying that aerosol products were like bad for the environment. It was tearing a hole in the ozone layer. That doesn't matter anymore. Now, if some of you are thinking that none of this makes sense, again, you're right, because this climate change is what's causing this, right? Their fear of climate change. Now, you don't call it global warming because lots of places on the Earth aren't warming. You call it climate change now. But they're saying they need to make it colder, so I guess it's global warming in this case. And by reflecting the sun, it'll make surface temperatures a little bit colder. Okay. Now, without us being scientists, maybe some of you are, let me know. Let's just take some logical, basic looks at science. And if you remember anything from junior high or middle school, you'll be right along with me on this. Their number one concern that's killing the planet, politicians have called it an existential threat for every living being and organism on this earth, is climate change. And the number one thing they're scared of, that boogeyman of climate change, is carbon, CO2 emissions. Now, you might ask yourself, how do you get rid of CO2? Well, the number one way is carbon capture, which is from plants taking carbon, right? In a manner of speaking, they breathe in the carbon dioxide, and out comes our oxygen, right? Which, by the way, we all need oxygen to survive. This could be something to think about before British DARPA decides to chemtrail the Earth. So, this photosynthesis thing is pretty big. Plants need sunlight to turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. That's what is driving this whole thing. That's the scariest thing, is that there's too much carbon in the air. Okay, so their plan, and if this seems like they got their wires crossed, obviously they did. Their plan is to reduce sunlight. Now, yes, that will, obviously, less sunlight, less photosynthesis. Less photosynthesis, less carbon capture being turned into oxygen. Simple as that. So they've decided to combat climate change with a complicated chemtrail process. And it's so ironic. They're going to do this, crazy meddling with the Earth's ecosystems in order to save its ecosystems from carbon by a result that will produce less carbon capture. That's what it is. It is absolutely insane, absolutely stupid. First off, it's not their ecosystem. It's not their atmosphere to do this to. I don't know where the British government gets off on this, where they think they should be able to. Their citizens aren't telling them to do this. The people around it aren't. And if I remember right, it's like it's an equilibrium type thing. The atmosphere, if you fart, eventually that fart's going to be spread out into like an equilibrium all across the world, right? Until it's just gone. So I don't know how these aerosol are just going to stay in one spot. It's just going to be like, no, we're going to go up here. We're going to spray a bunch of these chemtrails up into the air. And they're just going to hang within the insular borders of the United Kingdom. That's not what's going to happen. And in fact, if memory serves me, I used to fly little planes, not this high, but the jet stream is way up there. So you throw out these, a jet stream, by the way, it's like these heavy wind currents, wind gusts, like it's moving, this stream of air, moving east, from west to east at around like 150 knots, 200 knots, something crazy. So even if they put the aerosol just over the UK, right? Who's to say it's not going to blow over first to Denmark or the Baltic states or Russia, which I'm sure those people would love. So I don't know where the UK government thinks they have the right to do this, because I'm here to say that they do not. And even if they did have the right, you've got the right to do all sorts of stupid stuff. It doesn't mean you should. It doesn't. By the way, Bill Gates is behind this. If anyone was like just wondering, scratching their head, Bill Gates is in support of this. If you remember, in the past few years, we've had some government experiments go wrong. It wasn't in the air over London last time. It was in some bat-infested lab in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We've had these things go awry before. These experiments. These aren't controlled experiments. It's not even an experiment. It's a real-world plan of action. When you say an experiment, you should be thinking of something with a control where you're trying to collect data to see if there's real-world application. They're just going to go for it. And they want to put this aerosol up into the air. There was also something along the lines of making the clouds above the ocean brighter, which would also reflect more sun. They got a couple of different ways they want to do this. And the fact that they're trying to combat carbon, which is just destroying the world if you're in on that, with less sun. By the way, Britain, it's the cloudiest place in the world. We make fun of you for your shitty weather and your bad food. Now, personally, I kind of like some fish and chips. Yorkshire puddings, those look nice. Like, your food's okay. Your government's dumb. And your weather does suck. It's cloudy and gray all the time. You're the last place. If this wasn't even a terrible idea, why would... You know what we need? We need a sand machine in the Middle East. Right after we make Britain cloudier, we need to get some sand machines in the Middle East. That's what we need, guys. And we should probably spend 50 million pounds to do it. Absolutely dumb. You guys are turning yourself into Disney villains. Who else would come up with a evil plot? You have to be Bill Gates or a Disney villain to come up with a plot to give the world less, to make Britain cloudier. That sounds like a Disney plot. It's not. That's the government that is running the United Kingdom. Formerly the greatest empire on earth at one point in time. And to be fair, I just keep thinking, it reminds me, I'm a big Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan. And this idea where it's like, hey, we have too much carbon. It reminds me of this episode where Charlie comes into the apartment and Dee's got a problem. She's got a cat stuck in the wall. And he comes in, he's like, oh, cat in the wall, huh? And she's like, yeah, Charlie, you got to help me get this cat out of the wall. He's like, well, to get it out, we got to put another cat in the wall. Right? Then those two will become codependent with each other. And then hopefully they both come out when we yank the other one out. We'll tie a rope to it. It's like, we need at least one cat, maybe three. He's like, that's what it seems like. It seems like, how do we fix this problem? It's the cat in the wall problem. That's what they're doing. They're like, how do we fix all this carbon? What if we made it to where we don't make as much carbon? Absolutely insane. Now, I don't think they're going to be able to do this en masse enough to where actually would affect the weather. It might disrupt local weather patterns for however long the aerosol particulates stay in there. I'm not sure. But imagine if they do this to a scale where it does affect things, weather patterns. This is tremendous. So we talked about the plants for carbon because the government's obsessed with carbon capture and rising CO2 levels. I don't give a damn about that. But do you know who does care about sunlight? People that like to eat, farmers. Every crop, you should know, and maybe some smartass is going to say mushrooms, but I bet even to some extent they need it. But every major food crop in the world needs the photosynthesis process to take place. Wheat, corn, rice. You need that sunlight. Now, Britain already, I believe, imports food. I think they're already at a deficit. They don't make enough food for their number of people. And then if you talk about all the other animals, right, it doesn't matter. You've got beef or you've got pork or whatever it is you're raising. They will be eating plants from photosynthesis. Those plants need that. Furthermore, plants need rain. And if there's less sun, there's potentially less evaporation or delayed evaporation. And now all of a sudden, you have this thing. You mess up one thing, just like the market. You make one little market correction. You think you can do some sort of planned economy. You do one thing and 20 to 50 things result because of that one thing that you haven't foreseen. Okay? So, not only are we going to have less sunlight for the plants, we could be possibly screwing up rain and evaporation and rain cycles. Now, worst case scenario, what if this goes throughout and it's enough? By the way, this is a big if, and I don't expect this to happen overnight, and probably not with this one, but if they continue to escalate this type of a program, what happens? If it disrupts the monsoon in East Asia, that monsoon, the rainy season, is responsible for feeding a very large percentage of the earth. That's how they grow their rice, based off the monsoon. You plan on it. And if you don't have the monsoon, you don't have the rice crops. You don't have the yields that you need for a planet of, what are we at, 8 billion, 6 billion, whatever billion to survive. You don't get that food. This is a wildly reckless idea. The lead guy is named Mark Symes. He's a professor of electrochemistry and electrochemical technology. If any of that sounds like it has anything to do with the weather, let me know, because from what I see, this guy has no business trying to change the Earth's weather. I have to believe, skeptically, I just don't trust the governments anymore. Haven't for a while, but since COVID, just less than ever. I have to believe this isn't about lowering the temperature. I feel like this is more about experimenting on ways for controlling the weather for food production purposes, or the termination or suppression of food production. I have to believe that. This seems much more likely to cause us to have less flora, smaller yields of crops, smaller harvests, than it does to be able to lower the Earth's temperature enough to combat this boogeyman of CO2. It just doesn't add up. If you do enough stratospheric aerosol injection to lower the Earth's temperature enough for this all to happen, well, there will be less crops and food shortage. Even if it works the way they want, there will be less crops. We've been in a global greening for the last 20 years, like 20% of the Earth, like since I was born, or maybe it's the past 50 years or so. 20% of the Earth is like greener when it wasn't. Like we are, what is it, de-desertification? Was that what you'd call it? Desertification? Like, we're greening the world right now. And what people have found out is that as this more carbon happens, the spores, or excuse me, the pores on the plants get bigger to where they can grab water and carbon better. And so there's, as a result, these places that were too dry formerly to have plant life is now having plant life again. I just can't believe that this is their ultimate goal. And I mean, Bill Gates buying up farmland. Bill Gates talks about population. Like, Bill Gates is very suspicious. Him being tied to this at all, very worrisome. Now, let's say it's for their best intentions and they think, hey, we're saving the planet with carbon. How much to make the whole world cool enough to forgo this terrible cataclysmic carbon, runaway carbons, climate change? How many jets are going to have to go burn that jet fuel all the way up into the stratosphere? And you do burn less jet fuel as you get higher, but you're still running it up every time you take off, right? How much carbon are you going to put in the air just to throw these aerosol particles up into the stratosphere? I don't know that you can do this. And now you've got this weird self-fulfilling prophecy from governments and these dullards who are so terrified of climate change and humans' effect on meddling with the environment that they are going to meddle with the environment to affect climate change. And I'll tell you, a little bit of rising sea levels, that could be very bad. Sure, I get it. But you look historically, the medieval warming period, right? Antiquity. These times were warmer. The Dark Ages were colder. Generally, the greatest buildings, the biggest rises of civilizations happen during warm periods. And when it gets colder, the Ice Age, the Little Ice Age, the Dark Ages, things tend not to be as nice for people. And it's this weird self-fulfilling prophecy where we're just going to put cats in the wall until we've got a real problem. Now, I don't think that can happen. I don't think it'll go that far, but what good is going to come of throwing aerosols up into the stratosphere? I'm guessing negative effects. So I plan on following this more closely. Oh, I almost forgot. Because of this news, I think it was today or yesterday, Florida. The Florida Senate just banned the use of chemtrails in the state of Florida. Now, 10 years ago, before COVID, before Trump, before whatever else, if you had heard that Florida in 2025 was banning chemtrails, it'd be a classic Florida man caption. And you say, oh, hilarious. A bunch of these Florida rubes banning chemtrails or whatever. No one's saying chemtrails don't exist now. No one is saying that. Now, I don't know. You can get into a semantic argument. These aren't chemtrails because they're not trails. They're just going to be dispersed by rockets, like a firework or something. I don't know. You can get into the semantics. But Florida is forward thinking. And it's these right-wing Republicans from Florida that are like, let's not destroy the Earth's atmosphere. And these liberals from Europe, which was thought to be progressive and, superior to us in their environmental ways these years ago, they're like, no, we're gonna work on stratospheric aerosol injections with Bill Gates and try not to destroy the world completely, but just within the margins of how much we want to destroy it. So good job, Florida. The headline only could make sense in 2025, but positive news from them. Let's hope America follows suit on that. And hopefully there's some European countries, especially those east of England where the jet stream might be affecting them. Hopefully they get their panties in a bunch and really raise some hell on this, because this is an idea that should not get off the ground. Okay. Now, the second bit's going to be a little bit funner and shorter too, because that was my rant for the day. Michelle Obama has a podcast. Let's look up what it's called, because to be honest, I don't listen to it. IMO with Michelle Obama and Craig Robinson. And Craig Robinson, for those of you that don't know, appears to be Michelle Obama with a shaved head. Okay, so in my opinion, with Michelle Obama and Craig Robinson, and to promote their show, by the way, we're trying to let's like and subscribe. Let's get more subscribers than Michelle Obama and her bald doppelganger. She's been doing different podcasts. She's trying to promote the show, just like a good person would. By the way, guys, I need the subscribers. Get me those things. I want some. I'm not going to take the Ben Shapiro My Pillow money. I don't want to be a part of it. I will take the lamest sponsor you can imagine. I will sell out so quick it'll make your head spin. Michelle Obama doesn't need that. All right, let's have me beat Michelle Obama. Okay. But she's getting on podcasts. She's talking to people, and she talked recently to the Diary of a CEO podcast. Who is, what's his name? Stephen Bartlett. Kind of a suave British fellow. I don't know what he was the CEO of, but pretty good podcast. I've listened to it some, and he has on a lot of interesting guests, and he's really good at kind of just letting them take the wheel and just find out about them. He's not so much a huge personality as he is just an inquisitive guy that kind of gives you insight on different people. So Michelle Obama gets on there. And this is going to come as a shock to you, but she's a little out of touch. There's something really disgusting about famous and rich people. Maybe disgusting is too hard of a word. It's very abrasive, very annoying when you see people trying to be a man of the people. Like I think that's one thing people like about Trump is because he's like, I put my name in gold giant signs everywhere. He doesn't try to be like you. And then there's some stuff where he is. He's like, I like a McDouble. He still thinks he's better than you, but he's eating the McDouble and doesn't make any bones about it. It's weird. You see Hillary Clinton taking a shot of whiskey with some West Virginia coal miners, and it just makes your skin kind of crawl up. There's a lot of Republicans, when they're campaigning, they go out to the shooting range. They've never been to the range in their life. They might have, maybe they're pro-Second Amendment, or they're fine with supporting it for whatever. But when you see them hold the gun in their hand, it's like the weirdest thing ever. And they look so damn awkward. You're like, I think this dude's gay. I don't think he's ever held a gun before. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I don't believe that anything natural is going on when that guy holds a gun. It would look like me dancing to ABBA. Like, hey, put on some Scandinavian disco and start dancing. I'm going to look really out of place. And that's what a lot of those Republicans look like when they're holding those guns. One of my favorites of these guys trying to act like regular Joes, a year or two ago, was it Memorial Day or Labor Day? It was like a picture of Chuck Schumer or some congressman or senator, and he's like grilling burgers, and he's got this raw burger just sat on the grill. I don't even think the grill's on. I don't even think they had charcoal underneath that grill, but it's not hot. It's not lit. There's just a raw burger on it, and on top there's cheese on top of that raw burger, and it was just a photo op. It's like, this is so weird. Or Elizabeth Warren drinking beer. The list goes on. These guys are never normal. But at least sometimes they try. And here we're going to see Michelle Obama try to relate, or we're going to listen to Michelle Obama trying to relate to us just how hard it is. Like, things are expensive nowadays, thanks in large part to her husband and the Bushes, everyone since Woodrow Wilson. Right? Just running up government debt and expanding the money supply. But let's listen to her and just relate to the struggles of an Ivy League multi-millionaire who had to spend 8 years in the White House. This is her talking about just how difficult it was living in the White House.
Projecting that if you win, which I thought he could and should, he would be somebody that I would want as my president. It was all about this is going to, our kids are little. We're going to have to move. How do you raise kids in the White House? It's dangerous. As the first Black potential president, we knew there would be death threats. There were just how would we afford it? Because it's expensive to live in the White House. As many people don't know. I mean, much is not covered. You're paying for every bit of food that you eat. You're not paying for housing and the staff in it, but everything, even travel. If you're not traveling with the president, if your kids are coming on a Bright Star, which is the First Lady's plane, we had to pay for their travel to be on the plane.
All right. There's a little bit of laughing. I took that part. I think I got that from a little clip from Megyn Kelly. That was her laugh. She's not in the room with me right now. Relax. Okay. Poor Michelle Obama. Like, you don't have to pay for the house, but you got to pay for the food, guys. The food. And by the way, they're not eating like Trump. They're not buying McDoubles. They're eating all sorts of swanky elitist stuff. I guarantee it. I'll give her credit. I bet it's not a pony ride raising kids in the White House. For sure. But they had to pay for their own food. Which honestly shocked me. $36 trillion in debt. I thought we were picking up the tab for the first family. But for them to bitch about it. And by the way, not only the food, and thankfully she didn't have to pay for all the staff and the help and the maids, because that would have just broke them. That would have been too expensive because they've got a lot of maids. They've got a lot of staff. But they had to pay for food. Have you guys ever done that? So, walk a mile in Michelle Obama's shoes. They could barely, after having to buy all that foie gras, after having to buy all those New York strips and fresh seafood and crab cakes or whatever the hell, adrenochrome kidneys, after they had to eat and pay, after they had to pay for all that, they could barely buy a beachfront mansion in Martha's Vineyard. It was stressful. Thankfully, the lobbyists and the elites gave them enough money from fake book deals or whatever that they're just rich as. But they had to pay for their own food. I just never realized it was that difficult. And by the way, their own, yes, the government provided them a private jet, and it got a name like some sword off of Game of Thrones, Bright Star. But they had to pay for it. They had to pay for the fuel. Okay? Why don't you walk a mile in their shoes? Next time you think that it's all just one big pony ride being the president or the first lady, why don't you remember that they had to pay for their own food? Puts a little perspective on stuff. What have you had to do? Right? The plight of the most powerful person in the world and his family. It reminded me, I'm going to close it with this. This is what it reminded me of. And before I go, I'm going to cut out right after I play this last bit from the great Chael Sonnen. But before I go, make sure you've liked and subscribed. Make sure you tell your friends. Share this thing, right? Now, Chael Sonnen is one of my favorite UFC fighters of all time. And Michelle Obama's anguish, her pain, her suffering, reminded me of a promo that the great Chael Sonnen cut. I encourage you to listen to the whole thing sometime. I'm going to play it about halfway through just so you kind of get the point. But this is kind of the plight he had, which sounds somewhat similar.
This guy, stranger to me, takes a piece of gum out of his pocket, he puts his mouth, and he just throws the wrapper on the ground. There was a police officer standing right there. He didn't do anything. And I saw that. I had to see these things at a young age. Sure, somebody came along, somebody picked it up, somebody threw it in the trash can. But for the few moments where that sat on the ground and the law was violated right here in my neighborhood, you look at me, there was years where my father didn't even make $100,000 or barely made $100,000. And sure, we had a maid, but she only came twice a week. What do you think happened the other 5 days? You think those dishes washed themselves? My neighbors were twins. They got a Mercedes for their birthday, but just one. They had to share that car. They had to share that car. Who gets to drive today? You haven't seen the things I've seen. You haven't been down that way. You haven't been to the mean streets of Westland, Oregon.
All right, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.